Mainland and Island Planning Commission special call joint work session. We aren't going to approve the minutes tonight. We don't have a quorum, but I would like to ask Commissioner Neal to join us in this discussion this evening. Commissioner, would you like to go ahead and begin?
Well, we can't just skip the minutes. We're going to try to bring up relevant topics tonight, be specific in what we do, and try to let presentation come forward from Ms. Leaf. We'll go over the key changes and that kind of thing that are there. There are things that obviously aren't here yet that we're still working on, but I would like for her to be able to give her presentation in full, and then we'll start discussion.
Sounds like a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Chairman Neal. Good evening, Commissioner. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. So I'll just kind of go through a few things before we get started on the discussion. So the last time that we were all together with a joint work session was on September 18th, and during that work session we did have public comment. That was the primary goal of that meeting, so there really was, I think, very little, if any, discussion at all. And during that September 18th meeting, I did provide an overview of some of the key changes, so I'm not going to repeat what I did present on the 18th. So what I'm just going to do is kind of highlight a few additional things that we've sort of added to the list. And I will note that the zoning review team that's been working on this working group, is still meeting and having discussions. So because of the last two hurricanes we had over the last couple months, we were not able to get a new draft out for discussion for this meeting. So all the discussion tonight and what I'll be highlighting is based off of the August 8th zoning ordinance draft and then the July 30th subdivision regulations. And that's what's on our website as the working drafts now. And that was also what everyone was commenting on at your last September 18th meeting as well. So just a few additional things to highlight with some key changes. This is between our working drafts that we have now and the current ordinance. So some of the things that we have looked at is how to really initiate some workforce housing in our community, and are there some ways on the regulatory side that we can try to incentivize workforce housing. And so there's still going to be continued discussion on that, but a few things we looked at is reducing lot sizes, and I do have an example I'll go through in a little bit in our higher density residential zoning districts, so that you could have a single family home on a smaller lot than what you currently could under today's ordinances. We heard a lot of comments during the work session, as well as what we received are written comments about some environmental preservation initiatives or looking at how to have a little bit more environmental preservation in our ordinance. One of the areas that we looked at was we do have a conservation preservation zoning district in our code, and we are looking at adding maximum site coverage in the different zoning districts in the ordinance. And for the CP zone, we have had some discussion. It's not in the current draft. We've had some discussion about really lowering that to a 30% site coverage. CP, most of these lots are marsh. There might be a little bit of upland that's still zoned CP, but in most cases, this is area that does not have a lot of development potential. And but in order to look at this in a way that we can say that we're looking at some preservation initiatives, this is something we've talked about. Under parking, we are looking at, for multifamily and some of the commercial, reducing a parking requirement. Again, that would be to help with some development standards and maybe have some higher density in some areas by reducing parking. We have added some different requirements for short-term rentals and also larger homes over 4 bedrooms. We have had a lot of comments about sea turtle lighting, sea turtle regulations, and so that is a continued conversation. We have had some changes that we've made to the ordinance to reflect some of the comments, but that is a continued conversation, and we're really, we're hearing those conversations that we're having, and we'll continue to discuss that with the zoning review team. Under our St. Simons tree canopy preservation ordinance, that does just apply to St. Simons Island right now. We looked at reducing the number of trees per acre from 12 trees to 8 trees per acre, and but in addition to this, this would apply to more of the types of development than it currently does. So it would be triggered with more single-family homes than what it currently is. Right now, a single-family home lot In most cases, this is going to be exempt unless they're under a tree plan as part of a subdivision. But we do have a 38-inch diameter breast height live oak or greater. If someone's removing that, then that is something they need to get a permit from the county for. For planned development districts, we have, I think it's over 450 probably countywide right now for PDs. And what we do see a lot of that come in is amendments to those PDs. You know, all these were done 20 years ago, and we do see a lot of amendments to those. So we really wanted to try to clarify how to handle those amendments and, you know, make sure the integrity of the initial PD, you know, is really considered, and we're looking at these amendments in different ways. We did receive some comments from the Airport Commission about the airport overlay. And so we made some changes, and we still need to make some changes in the next draft to reflect some of their needs for that overlay. And something that we haven't really had much discussion about, but we do have a kind of a keeping of pets change. So right now under the FA zone, chicken, goats, and pigs are only allowed in FA, but we are looking at allowing them in more residential areas. We do have a lot of folks that have backyard chickens or would like to. So this is part of the ordinance working draft. Another thing we've looked at for this working draft is looking at density of 28 bedrooms per acre in some of the single-family zoning districts. Currently, we have a bedroom restriction in resort residential, and then also for substandard lots of record. Like that's the only areas where we reference a number of bedrooms you can have in a home. And so the working draft does include more districts that would have density based on a bedroom count. We've also had some discussions about billboards, and we received some comments as well. This is not yet in the current working draft, but we've had additional discussions about having new billboards be special use permits. Right now in the draft, we do say conversion to a digital billboard, would be a conditional or special use permit. And then just kind of more of a housekeeping type thing, definitions. In our current ordinance, we have it in the front of our code. The draft that we're working on, it's in the back, but we're thinking about moving it back to the front, so that's kind of more in keeping with how we see our ordinance or view our ordinance now. So that's kind of in a nutshell for the zoning ordinance, and then just a few things on the subdivision regulations. There aren't a lot of changes, and some of these I went over at the last meeting as well, but I'm going to go through a little bit more on how we're handling private access easements and one-time division of lots. We also are establishing some thresholds for when a traffic study will be required. And then we're also looking at getting additional drainage calculations and plans earlier in the process than we do now. So we would require those at a preliminary plat stage in order to allow our staff and, you know, if there's any commissioners involved in the review of that, then they would have that information to be able to make informed decisions on a platting of a project. One of the changes we're proposing is the preliminary plats used to go before the planning commissions for review. In 2018, that was a code change, and now they're administrative. This working draft does have, on the island, preliminary plats going back to the island's planning commission for review. On the mainland, they would stay as administrative review. And then we are looking at clarifying when wetland delineation would be required. That's very pertinent to the Environmental Health Department for septic and wells, and it's also just something that that earlier we know if there's wetlands on the property, and if they're delineated, then we can, you know, better make informed decisions on a property, and plus an owner will know, you know, if they have some development restrictions. All right, so that's just some of the key changes. And then I did want to just go through, we've received a lot of public comments, as I've mentioned, and our zoning review team group did take a look at all the public comments that we've received on these working drafts thus far. And there is a document that I think we have some copies at the back as well, but they're also passed out to the planning commissioners. So this is a spreadsheet of all the comments that we have received, in addition to the ones we received at the meeting of the 18th. And just kind of a quick summary of what those comments were, and then if the zoning review team discussed all of them, but if they made changes based on those comments, if there still needs to be further discussion, or if they did not address the change, if it was a request that we did not incorporate. So just on the right-hand side, we have some just notes on how the ZRT handled those public comments. So just we did review all of them and took all of them into consideration as we continue to work on these drafts. So just a few scenarios, kind of graphically, visually, kind of showing you what some changes might look like. On the subdivision regulations, one of the things I mentioned earlier was currently we have an expedited subdivision is it's basically a minor plat. It's 4 lots or less. And right now, what we say is if you subdivide your property, you can only do that once. If you have platted it, you couldn't do that more than once under expedited subdivision. If you do want to divide it further because you have a lot of acreage, you would need to go through the full preliminary plat, potentially construction plan and final plat steps with that. There is more time involved in that, more cost. And so what we've done is taken out that restriction, and so you could potentially subdivide your property if it meets the other criteria multiple times under the expedited subdivision. And so the bottom of the screen, there is an example of a recently approved final plat that if this code is changed, this could go, if they wanted to subdivide again, if they could, or this particular subdivision could come through that as an expedited instead of the preliminary and final plat. Because this had already been platted in a subdivision, they did 1 lot, and they did have to go through that full process. And then on the islands, currently anything up to 4 lots can go through the expedited subdivision process. This working draft does have all divisions of lots, all lot splits, going through the full preliminary plat and final plat stages. So the expedited subdivision for an actual lot split or creation of new lots would not be allowed on the island. Now, if you're going to just move a lot line, remove a lot line to merge lots, then that could be done still under expedited subdivision. And what we have in the current code too, just with subdivisions, expedited subdivisions, we allow a maximum of 4 lots to come off of an access easement. We have added in that you could have up to 6 lots, and these are more in the rural areas. You could have up to 6 lots if the lots are 2 acres or larger. So in a rural area where the lots are larger, there could be up to 6 that could come off of that. Then we've talked at the last meeting as well, we do have a site coverage maximum that we're proposing. Currently in our current ordinance, the only places we have a site coverage maximum is under village residential and resort residential, and that's the 50%. The proposed draft does institute a 60% site coverage maximum in all residential zones, and then I just included the definition of site coverage, so we know what that really entails, and this is what's proposed in the working draft, this definition. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Higgins for helping us out with this graphic, so we had something to really take a look at. This would be an example of an 8,250 square foot lot, and what a new house with a pool and deck would look like with the 60% lot coverage requirement. And so it spells out exactly everything that's included in that. And then the site coverage total is a 59% site coverage. And so for that size lot, they really have minimum setbacks of 7 feet on the sides and the rear, a 20-foot setback on the front. They have a pool, they have a deck, they've got a impervious driveway. So there wasn't, this is kind of a typical single family project that we see a lot of. And so this is some new language that we have in this working draft. It's called contiguous parcels under common ownership. And what this really involves is if you have some historic kind of lots of record that are under one tax parcel, and if a house was built across those lots, which was very, very common when someone might have done a larger ranch house in the 60s or 70s, and it went across several maybe smaller lots in Glynn Haven or German Village or any of these subdivisions that had these older, smaller lots. And what this says is that if you have this scenario, and this picture shows this, these kind of purple dotted lines that you see, those are the lot lines of the historic lots of record. The black bold line is the tax parcel. So in this case, this house goes across about 2.5 lots of record. And so if it has contiguous parcels that are they're connected contiguous, and at least one of them is 6,000 square feet or less, or a lot width of 60 feet or less, plus the house crosses the lot lines, which is in this example, and they apply for a building permit to add on or do a remodel. I think what we really had in mind was adding on to the structure, expanding it. Then they are required to merge these lots together. So that would be the scenario in that kind of a situation. And so this is new language that's in this working draft. Accessory dwelling units is also something new that we have in this working draft. Currently, under our current ordinance, we do not allow a separate structure. So if it has a full bath and a kitchen, it's not allowed as a separate standalone structure on a property. Basically, we see that as creating two dwelling units on a single-family property that's not allowed. What we often see is kind of what we have in this picture. The county staff, over the years has interpreted that, something like a mother-in-law suite where you have, maybe some kitchen facilities and a full bath, as long as it's attached to the house, it's considered part of the house. And so it's not a standalone structure on the property. And it has to have a structural connection and be accessible, basically door to door. So in this example, you've got a, structural breezeway, you see a door going into the ADU garage, you see a door going into the main house, and this is considered, part of the same structure. So this scenario would be allowed under the current code. However, this scenario doesn't work for everybody. There's different design choices that people want on their properties, and so the new language does allow a standalone, separate ADU up to 800 square feet. It may or may not be connected, so that's a design choice. You can only have one ADU per lot. It can have a max of 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and can include a full kitchen. And the property owner can only rent, under the current code, and we're having some additional discussions on this, under the current, the working draft, that you can only rent the principal dwelling or the ADU, but not both. So what we're trying to get away from is, basically commercial use on a property where someone may, build a house, build an ADU, and both of those, are short-term rentals. So in this case, you could have additional income coming from an ADU or the main house while the owner is living in one of those units. But we've had some continuing discussions about kind of this rental scenario and, how can this really help workforce housing by maybe changing how we allow rentals in the property. So that's a continued discussion. And as I mentioned before, one of the other elements is allowing smaller lot sizes in some of our higher density zoning. So, for example, under medium residential, which is a 16 unit per acre zoning district, the current code says you can have a 6,000 square foot lot for a single family home. The proposed working draft, it goes down to 4,000 square feet. So that's kind of my overview of some of the changes that we've been talking about. And so at this point, I will actually turn it over to Chairman Neal for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
May I ask a question? May I, sir?
Yes.
Is this all the stuff that we've changed? Or is this just highlighted, just a few items that we've changed? The things that...
This is just highlighted. Everything's not in the list that Stephanie just gave us.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question, our current rules and regulations are nothing like this at all. So there's hundreds, if not thousands of things that's been changed. I just wanted to point that out. That's kind of a brief overall of what's happened. But there's thousands of things that have been changed in here.
All right.
May I address it?
Give me just a minute. I want to give some outline on how we want the discussions to go tonight. Stephanie has given the overview, but we want to spend the majority of our time tonight looking over the zoning ordinances and then some on the subdivision. But the goal is to achieve a consensus tonight on a proposed draft, and we'll go over those changes. We want to make sure that we're working together to try to bring a resolution to this, if at all possible. We want to identify elements that are truly a major conflict from achieving a consensus versus dotting I's and crossing T's. Well, this whole document will go out to a legal team that will clean up and address grammar, punctuation, all those kind of things, and address anything that might be of legal consequence that may have inadvertently been put in. If we get bogged down on a topic tonight, what we want to do, put it on a sticky note. We'll put it over here on the pad, and we'll bring that up later, rather than get bogged down into one issue that will carry on too long through the night. We want to try to avoid generalities. We want to talk about specifics, page, chapter, subsection, to be able to actually address the issues. And if we can't, like as I said, if we can't get to a consensus on this stuff, then let's put it on a note, sticky note. We'll put it on the board, and we'll address those things and then convene again. So sort of lay out some ground rules for how we can move forward and not be here to midnight. So, Robert, you have something you'd like to address?
Well, I would like to say in terms of the ordinance looking different. I think we have, we've gone through lots of different scenarios with this new ordinance, and we were given an ordinance to begin with to revise, which quite honestly, I think as the more we got into it, we realized that what we needed to do, and Mr. Chairman, I think at one point you suggested we do this, is just take the ordinance, start at the front, take our existing ordinance and compare it all the way through, which is what we've done. It's been a long process. I think a lot of the language in the old ordinance has been incorporated into the new. Now it's in different places. In other words, for instance, uses that were in each zoning category are now in a chart, but the uses have not changed. In other words, what would be allowed in a general commercial use is now in a chart, as opposed to in the language that addressed general commercial as a whole. So the chart we felt like was easier to go through. If somebody wanted to build a barbershop, for instance, you could go to the chart and find barbershop, and you could find every zoning district in which a barbershop was allowed, instead of going to general residential and finding barbershop, and then you have to go to highway commercial and see if a barbershop was allowed there. We felt the chart was better. So a lot of what has been changed is not in content so much as where we put the regulations. And Mr. Chairman, I think that was one of the things that the County Commission charged us with, is trying to make this a little more user-friendly and a little more comprehensive going forward. So I agree with Commissioner with Neil that it looks different.
Yeah.
It looks different. The content, I think, if you go through it, by and large, it's pretty close to what we've had before.
All right. Thank you, Robert. The one of the things that I have asked staff to make sure that we do when we get to a final draft of this thing, that we have a consensus on, is that we put something that would resemble a preamble to this thing, saying that, of all the effort and all the work that's gone into this thing, we're not going to find everything that needs to be changed, and there will be mistakes in it. So we want in the preamble that this is a living document, that we will be able to address these things moving forward. And I think we can achieve that. We know that we're not going to find every single thing in a document, and the first thing out of the chute will probably be something that got overlooked. We recognize that. When we had the 2018 comprehensive plan, it was said it would be a living document, and then it became cast in stone. We're going to make sure that it is in writing, in bold, that we're not making a document here that's unchangeable. We're also want to emphasize that we're not going to take away property rights of anybody. If there's anything that's inadvertently in this thing that would diminish the property rights of an FA zoning, and whether or not you can have what is reasonable, we're working to make sure that comes out of the final draft, and it's not our intent to diminish anybody's property rights here. There are other issues in this in the document that we want to talk about, and issues that have been brought up. And what I'd like to do is, as we start this thing tonight, is go to case in point of what concern you have, and let's take these things one at a time. We'll get them down. We'll discuss them, try to come to a consensus if we can on what needs to happen, and then we'll move on to the next one. So, we'll open it up and open the discussion.
Well, sir, we haven't met our goals to start with. Mr. Chairman just said that it's more intrusive, it's more
He
cumbersome.
doesn't say that, Neil.
It's more cumbersome, and it's harder
He
to
didn't say
read.
that at all. And,
It's, Commissioner Chairman, Commissioner David O'Quinn, the chairman, before you, charged all of us, he wanted it more friendly, user friendly. He wanted it developmental friendly. You can take this to any developer you want to in Glynn County, and if you give him a week or two to read it, and he gets his lawyer to look over it, he's gonna tell you, sir, it's not very.
well, that's what you can
developer-friendly.
do. That's what you can do. Tonight, for our purposes, we're gonna try to state a case in point. That was my goal, Neil, from the very beginning, is the people that are gonna use the document, read the document. Read it, find where the strong points are and where the weak points are, but read it and bring those comments back to us. Most everybody hasn't, as of yet, taken the opportunity to give input on that out in the working community that you and I live and work in every day. But they will have the opportunity, once we do this, to be able to read that and bring it back, and we invite that. But we're not, if you'll allow me, we're not gonna sit here and debate whether or not we should have done this way or not. This is the way, the course that it's taken. This is where it is. This is where we're gonna try to get to a final adoption. Once the public has their chance to read it, make their comments, come back to us on, if it's not a document that this community wants to live with, then it'll get voted down by the commission when it comes to us.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say one more thing and then I'll hush. The last meeting we had on September 18th, yes, correct, September 18th, me and Mr. Gentry had at least a 30 or 45-minute conversation. He point blank said, Neil, what will make you happy? I said, if you folks, the powers to be, I'm not the power to be, will send this. I'm not talking about that law firm that's going to tell our attorneys if they have the right to sue me because I don't get a building permit. I'm talking about a firm that will protect the citizens of Glynn County and not take our property rights away from us. Miss Gloria Burns and Al Burns and other people, I bring them up because I know them and I know their capabilities. They can tell us companies, nobody that has worked on this, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to you, sir, I have great respect for you, nobody is a zoning ordinance specialist, a trained professional. And that's all I'm asking for, is to send it to a company to go, when you find folks get through with it, let's send it to a company, let them go through it line by line, and let us inform the public of what's going to happen to them and how this is going to change. That's all I'm asking for. All I want out of this process is to protect the public.
And to say that would imply that the rest of us don't.
I'm not implying
and
that. But
that is, you know, if we can't get down to case in point.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this timeline right here indicates to me that somebody is pushing this hard to get this voted on by January of next year, January 2025. There's a lot, sir. If you took this to a company, if you took this to it would take them weeks, if not months, to go through this to compare what we have now to what we are proposing. It's not something they could do in 2 weeks, Mr. Chairman. It would take months and months. I told you I would hush. I'm done.
All right. Case in point, anyway.
We asked some questions about what Stephanie presented
Absolutely.
today, just some clarity. It might be clarity for other folks as well. So the trees per acre requirement that will impact all single family, I guess that's all of Glynn County, not just St. Simon's.
Just St. Simon.
Or just St. Simon's, okay. So is that for newly developed, not already final plat approved subdivisions, or does that apply to every residential lot?
If I may,
Okay.
It applies to new construction.
Okay, but already platted lots, so I could own a lot in the middle of 10 lots that are already developed.
It applies to
And
new
my-
building permits.
And my lot's a quarter of an acre.
Yes.
And so, you're gonna take 8 trees per acre and divide it by 4?
Right.
Okay, so none of my neighbors have to have any trees, but I do, because I waited the longest to build my house. I just wanna make sure I understand that.
Right. But many lots on St. Simon's already have trees.
Yeah, but I just wanna clarify.
Right.
You know, I always, and you know this, you know, the last man standing shouldn't have a tougher time than the first man standing. So it always concerns me where we go back and do something to a subdivision or a plan that's already platted. People have bought lots, they have made life plans around those. So that's, just one point to think about. I think there's absolutely the ability to do it moving forward. But I suspect there will be scenarios where the after effect of figuring that out will mess up people's life plans. So that's one concern.
All right, well, let's talk about that just a second then, because if I understood Robert's answer, he's saying if you're the last one in on a 10-lot subdivision, I think your scenario would say there's no trees in the subdivision.
Or
But
not
I mean,
necessarily,
it's, yeah, for argument's sake, that's what you're saying. So what Robert is answered was, if you're the last lot to build, then you have to do the trees per acre and fulfill that on your individual
No,
lot.
I would agree that if I have a quarter acre lot and that's 8 trees per acre, then I gotta do 2 trees.
Okay,
That meet whatever's the standard is that's passed. But none of my surrounding 8 neighbors or 9 neighbors had to do that. So, they invested in land in our community under a certain premise and were able to function under that premise. But because I waited 6 months too late or whatever it might be, I have an additional cost imposed on me that's not imposed on the other surrounding lots that bought in the same subdivision at close to the same time I did. I just waited longer to build on mine. So I'm being, whether you consider it punishment, I love trees.
yeah,
But whether you consider it, there's an additional cost that may have to be paid because they just waited a little too long to be the one to build on their
Yeah.
lot. But I would agree that you could do it moving forward with all new platted, and then everybody
Yeah.
goes into it, eyes wide open. I know I gotta have this, whatever, it could be beyond trees, right? It could be any of these things that really impact people's ability to do what they thought they were gonna do.
okay, Robert, the minimum tree size to meet the requirement, what is that?
There is no, it's, if they're new trees, it's a 2-inch caliper.
All right,
Be
yeah,
any tiny trees.
yeah,
Okay.
all right.
It's a
So-
sapling essentially.
And then also mentioned that we're reducing it from the current 12 trees per acre down to 8.
Correct.
So,
Yeah,
that is,
I think what we found on the committee was that 12 trees was, especially in new subdivisions, was just very difficult to achieve. And I'm working on one now and really having a tough time. It looks like with the subdivision I'm working on, I have to, at 12 trees per acre, buy 50 trees.
okay.
So that's
And
a lot of trees.
let me just take a point here. When you're talking into the mics, you need to be close to the mics or it will not pick up, and anything that's streaming will not, the listening audience out there will not be able to hear you. So, so if you don't have a mic, you'll need to borrow a mic, or perhaps our IT people can bring a handheld for you. All right, Missy, you've got another question?
Yeah, so on, just on the short-term rental and larger homes, so, again, saying anybody that pulls a building permit for a larger home, whether it's an existing home or a new build, if they go over 4 bedrooms, they'll have to meet the new parking regulations, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then on the short-term rentals, same thing. So they're gonna need to, if they don't have what the new parking regulation is, then they're gonna have to meet the new site coverage and the new parking regulation, correct?
Correct.
And so currently, just one question that kind of comes out of that, in that drawing that Mr. Higgins was so kind to do with the site coverage, was, a lot of people use right of way for for parking, right? So it may be that it's their grass, it could be that I owned a house over on the island that, had the little gravel eyebrow, all of that. So, I'm not sure that the STR ordinance is 100% clear that when you have to say to your guests, we have parking for this many vehicles at the property, don't bring more than that, right? I think some of those are counting, those eyebrows and all of those sort of things, which, I'm assuming this would do away with all of that, and they have to be able to have those parking spaces completely on their property at this new level of parking.
Parking's really not allowed in the right of way now.
Yeah.
Although people do it, right.
For any,
So.
did y'all
and-
change
and-
that?
And now,
No, I mean, that's the way it is now.
yeah,
Yeah.
no parking in the right of way or on neighbors, is how it is now.
Right.
And,
Now, Missy, that doesn't mean people aren't doing it. They do it all the time.
and,
It's just in counting parking spaces, required parking spaces, you can only count on,
Right.
parking spaces that
counting.
are on the lot.
Right. But like in our short-term rental, 2-year adventure of making that ordinance, there was a lot of discussion about that there is no county, the only county ordinance at that time, in our discussions then with the lawyers in the room, was that emergency vehicles have to be able to travel through, but you can absolutely park on the side of the street.
yeah.
And that residents, everyday full-time residents, use that level of parking every day in lots of subdivisions. So, again, you got, somebody that needs to add on for their family might not, if they want to add on, let me just, for an example, I already have a 6-bedroom house and I want to add a pool, I meet the site coverage, then I have to do more parking?
Yes. If you got a 6-bedroom house.
Yeah, that's troublesome to me,
All
just
right,
to share.
so,
Yeah.
let me understand that
Not adding
too.
any additional bedrooms,
Yeah,
but I have 6.
No.
I didn't think that was the
It's based
answer.
it's based on bedrooms only.
But would my house built in 1975 with 6 bedrooms have the level of parking of today's revised ordinance?
Most likely it would.
Well, Robert, tell them what the required ordinance would be under the new ordinance for a 6-bedroom house. How many parking
For a
spaces?
6-bedroom house, Stephanie may have it closer
Yeah,
than I
and
do.
I'm gonna defer to you every time, Robert,
Yeah.
but if you
He's
need
like
help,
our
don't
ordinance
hesitate.
encyclopedia
Yeah.
over there. It's a breathing encyclopedia of ordinance over there.
Well, we've been working on it for 20 years.
Yeah, no, you have.
Literally, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the current ordinance or the working draft?
The working draft.
The working
what's
draft?
required
Yeah,
of
I've got that number if you want it or if you have it in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can go ahead and read it.
Okay. So if it is 4 bedrooms so it's 2 spaces per dwelling unit, but it's let's see. So 4 bedrooms or larger, 2 spaces per dwelling, plus 1 for each bedroom over 4.
Right, so a 6-bedroom house would require 4. Now, here's the caveat. We do allow stacking. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you've got a 2-car garage, that's 2. If the
Okay.
driveway's 2 cars wide, that's 2 more. That's 4 already.
And if the driveway's 40 foot long, that's 2 more behind it.
Right.
So it would accommodate 6 as,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think we're trying to catch up with what reality is, and we're trying to discourage from parking in the road as much as possible. And for most of the short-term rentals we've seen, they actually comply. But there are some out there where we get that don't even hardly have the 2, let alone 4 parking spaces for a 6-bedroom house.
And you know, they're parking in the grass and that kind of thing. We're trying to make sure that we address that so that they can't park in the grass as well. You know, it has to be a designated parking space.
Yeah, and, you know, parking for short-term rental is different than it is for a single-family home. I mean, you get oftentimes with a 6-bedroom house, you have literally 6 vehicles there.
Yeah, I have a,
And then I've seen where we've even had more than that. In fact, I've had people, had relatives that
Let's,
rented a
let's don't get
6-bedroom
too
house.
far off track.
yeah, okay.
All right?
I'm curious, are we, I guess it doesn't matter what problem we're trying to fix, and it sounds like we're fixing
And
the one-offs.
it's two problems. It's
Yeah, but it's
short-term
the-
rental versus single-family,
Right.
residential lived-in,
Right,
yeah.
Yeah, we aren't changing single-family,
Those-
except for over 4. We are-
Over 4.
We aren't making it one per.
I do worry about that. I mean, that's not a huge burden, but, you know, anytime we create a situation where it encourages the person coming to get their plans done to misidentify a room as not being a bedroom so that they don't meet some requirement, that it's, you know, how many times are you gonna have a 5,000 square foot house and they're like, we got 3, when they really have other rooms they're using as bedrooms, but, and I just, as I argued in the short-term rental, committee, when we were reviewing all that, treat cars parked in the street or cars parked in the street. A short-term rental car is no different than your car or my car and that sort of thing. And it, you know, there was strong belief that on that committee and the people that came and talked to us that we want the short-term rental cars to behave differently than everybody else's car, but a car's a car in the street, right? So, you know, I get it if it's a new construction, but again, I don't know how many instances there's that short-term rentals don't meet this requirement. And I worry about, again, people bought a property, their intention was to short-term rent it, they've done everything right, and yet with a stroke of a pen, you've just eliminated their ability to be a short-term rental if they can't accommodate this parking requirement.
Well, I think they could accommodate the parking requirement if they had to add a driveway that, the shortest on the island would be 30 feet. You can make a 16-foot wide driveway and accommodate the 2 extra cars to I think they could do that. But do we have neighborhoods, mainly on the island, right now that their only parking is street parking? Are there any neighborhoods like that for the most part, it would be like city, some of our city lots where there is nothing
Coast
but
Cottages.
street parking
Yeah,
available.
Coast Cottages is the only one,
But it's, you know,
I mean,
those
it's
are-
kind of
all-
their streets.
those are, those
Yeah.
are parallel parking spaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would.
I just think,
Designated parking spots.
yeah, so I suppose, like, I could say, there could be a 4-bedroom house in Glen Haven that only has 2 parking spaces
Yeah.
today, that has no garage, that is, 25 feet off the front parking space. So for them to have back-to-back cars, they got at least the back end of one car's got to be in the right-of-way, even though it might be part of their driveway.
Right of way and street is slightly different, but still, you know, they need to
So-
accommodate if they're gonna do short-term rentals, and I'm a proponent, but they've gotta meet some guidelines so that they are not deteriorating the rights of their neighbors who aren't short-term rentals.
Right, well, it's
But
not
do
just-
you have
Yeah.
a suggested solution?
Well, I just think maybe people with existing short-term rental certificates that they're grandfathered in because they've borrowed money based on it, they've made life plans around it. Because I assume, you know, we're probably talking about East Beach, possibly, but probably definitely talking about Glen Haven and maybe some of like the Circle Drive and that area where they wouldn't have garages and they're already short-term rentals, and if they have 4 bedrooms or I guess 5 bedrooms, then they would need another parking space, and if it becomes a regular residence, because they can't do short-term rentals, if they have 5 bedrooms, they're still gonna be parking in the street.
And I get that. The question is, how many times is that gonna apply?
Well, I don't know,
And-
we're trying to solve a problem with,
Right.
like, with this thing, so you asked what my suggestion would be that existing holders of the certificate to have a short-term rental are grandfathered in against any new parking regulations. Because you're also putting a site coverage restriction on them. So they may not be able, even if they've got the space, they may not can do another driveway based on what they got, and I get, you and I, we had a good discussion that the vast majority of houses do not hit the 60% mark, but if you're gonna put additional parking burdens on them, they might, and then it might be, I can't accommodate it, I already borrowed money, on this property based on the fact that it was gonna be a short-term rental, and I need it to continue, and I already have a certificate, and now you're gonna take it away because I can't add another parking space.
And I'd like to suggest that we could look at this on a case-by-case basis as it arises, but rather than spend much more time on that, if we wanna have future, discussion on it, let's tag it and put it on the board.
Okay.
And let's move on to
I would agree that we could have future discussion on it.
yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah.
there are some existing short-term rentals that may not meet that requirement that we probably want to grandfather in, but I'd like to discuss it with our
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
Miss, is that all you got?
I just wanted to clarify on the merging of substandard lots. So, I think I've brought this up before. I sold a house that sits on, I wanna say, 10 substandard lots. And of those 10, it probably spans 6 of them. So what happens if that person gets a building permit to do something to their house, and the merging of what y'all would automatically merge far exceeds 6,000 square feet? You still gonna merge them?
We've had, if I may, we've had a lot of discussion about mergers, and I think the initial intent was if you do buy a building permit for a house that sits on several lots, then you would have to merge them, yes. We've had some additional discussion about changing that.
Okay.
That we haven't put it in this draft, and it's not in, it's.
That
currently-
definitely needs to be a yellow sticky note.
Well,
That's that's a point of contention. You are confiscating people's property if you do that.
I don't disagree. The, one thing that will remain, and one thing that is required on new builds, we are requiring that lots in any subdivision, regardless of whether or not they're substandard, those will have to be merged. They're merged now.
Yeah, if they cross the lot line.
They cross the
Yeah,
lot line.
right.
That,
May I? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
this isn't a new,
You're on.
this is not a new requirement, they have to do it now anyway. So if you wanna get a building permit, and there's an existing lot to meet setback requirements, cause they still look at those, historical lot lines as having setbacks, so they go away. Converse to that, if they've got 10 lots and they wanna tear it down, and they still got 10 lots, or they can combine them and still have 5 lots to build on at
I
this
don't
point.
know that I understood that. So
Well,
if
it's not a new requirement, really, it's being done now.
that it automatically merges all my lots that
You don't
are
have, now,
contiguous.
in this case, if they had a couple lots on the end, they still met setback requirements, they could, still have, they're buildable lots, so they're meeting setback requirements, or they could merge them all, or they could just do whatever they needed to meet requirements for their building permit.
I think,
That's a building permit, even if it's for a $1,200 change.
I think the part,
That's-
part.
We're talking
part-
an addition.
Part of the discussion,
Yeah,
part of
like-
the discussion
yeah.
we've been having, and
Yeah.
it's been casual, we haven't, and we've had some emails back and forth about that. But obviously, if you do an addition which crosses a property line, then
Right.
you would have to merge it. And I think we want that would have to still comply because that's the case now, Gary, I believe is what your
Yeah.
point is.
Yeah, it is. Basically, if you're getting a building permit, I'm talking about interior, but exterior, well, you're adding on a garage or a wing, a bathroom, that sort of thing.
But the way this change is written, is it for an exterior addition or is it any building permit?
Right, I think the way it's written currently, it's for any building permit. And the discussion is, should we do that different?
Should it only be if you increase the footprint?
Absolutely. If you get if you have electrical problem, have to change the electrical panel out and come get a
Or you have
permit,
storm
then
damage.
you got, correct, then you got to put all your lots together. And you might wanna give your grandkids a lot. So that's gonna happen to that person, excuse me, Robert, that's gonna happen to that person in that scenario. But in turn, I can go to St. Simon's and do my research and find a house that sits on 3 lots. I can tear it down and build 3 houses back. That's perfectly fine, but you gonna penalize that person that's lived there for 30 years because they need to upgrade their electrical service in the house? That stuff like that just don't make sense to me, guys.
Well, that's why we're discussing it.
And we'll tag that because it's a
Yeah,
valid
and
point.
And I think the idea of if we get it, if it goes outside the footprint, then that may be a reasonable way to read it.
That would make sense.
And I know we talked about exactly that.
Right.
at one point.
Yeah, whether or not it should apply to just additions or not, yeah.
All right.
And I think that's a reasonable request.
All right, one more thing I'd like to say. We've talked about a lot of stuff for years. And we come in some reason, we've got a January deadline for the county commission to vote on this. The point I was trying to make a few minutes ago, we're running out of time if this is gonna get shoved, and we can't continue. We have to get this kind of stuff fixed.
Right.
This is very detrimental to people, Robert.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I
But-
understand, and I agree with the deadline being kind of ominous.
Yeah, but it's a target date. It is not a deadline. And that is a difference.
Yeah,
It's a major difference.
we've had some setbacks because of hurricanes and storms and, people out. And we're a working group, by the way. All of us have a job to do.
Absolutely.
And so-
Hey, and I commend every person that's worked on this. I have no issue with anybody that's worked on this whatsoever. And I'm not trying to be, negative to any person that's worked on it. But the fact is, none of us are professionals. We will
Well-
still find issues with this thing 5 or 6 years down the road. And the minute,
And if you send this out to a,
Work on that, or architects and engineers and
and if you
surveyors.
send it to an outside firm, they're gonna be issues with it because no document is perfect. And I don't wanna keep coming back to that. I've heard your point on it
Yes, sir.
and I agree to it to a point.
yes, sir.
But there are professionals that have been in that work group. And as far as Ms. Burns goes, I think she is a premier expert in it. And we invite her to read once we get to the next draft. We want that input, absolutely.
Well, with that being said, why was she only invited to one meeting?
Let's don't go there. That's not the purpose of tonight's meeting. Missy, do you have anything else before we move on?
Robert and I talked about, the grandfathering question, how it varied from zoning classification. So where did y'all land on that, if it's destroyed by Mother Nature or fire?
I can tell you where the commission lies on it.
Okay.
If your property is destroyed by any kind of natural disaster, you will be able to build that property back in its own footprint to the standards. Don't let me get out. And you'll have up to 5 years to
That's
be
not
able to do it.
necessarily true. I'll stop you right there, Commissioner. I can tell you a scenario right now I'm dealing with.
It's a future scenario, Neil.
But I can tell you right now, I'm having an issue right now. Ellis Marine burnt down. I tore it down 2 years ago. We applied for a building permit, and we've got to spend roughly $20,000 to have the slab engineered.
But that's not what I said. It's in this proposed ordinance. You will not be punished. You will not be penalized for building back on your same footprint. In the proposed ordinance.
And that says that in the.
It will say that in the ordinance. You'll get to read it with your own 2 eyes.
Draft it's 5 years for everything. So
Thank
I think, yeah. And that's not what we're looking at tonight, unfortunately. But we've heard, I think Commissioner Neal, is 5 years is what we were shooting for.
That's my understanding.
That's all I got at the moment.
Oh, I see something
This,
else.
this isn't, yeah, this,
Don't worry.
this isn't the last bite at the apple, okay?
Yeah, no.
All right.
I have some questions. On new apartment complexes, how many parking spaces are required today per door?
Two.
Two. How many in the new proposal?
It depends on number of bedrooms. If it's multifamily, if it's a 1-bedroom, 1.5. If it's a 2-bedroom, it's 1.7. If it's a 3-bedroom, 2. 4 bedrooms and larger, it would be 2 spaces per dwelling plus 1 for each bedroom over 4. Now, you don't have a lot of apartments with more than 4 bedrooms.
Yes, sir.
So, no more onerous than it is today.
Well, it's less.
That's,
It's less parking spaces.
That's a great thing.
yeah, there's, never mind.
Yeah, we've reduced the number of parking spaces for multifamily.
All right. You got another question?
No, so not at this point.
All right. Anyone else? This is Gary?
I'll just make a comment about the tree ordinance, briefly, and when it came up, it was, 12 was always a lot, and it's a lot to put on a developer, where he's gotta plant all these trees for all these lots, and they don't know what person's gonna build what kind of house anywhere. Little research I did, really it was probably closer to 7 or a tad under that. Full-grown oak trees, that would consume an acre, so we looked at reducing it to 8, and also having it put on new construction. The big thing is tree canopy. We want a lot of trees on St. Simon's, and actually you'll probably get more trees planted this way. You know, on the existing smaller lots, there's probably a lot of trees around them already if you're looking at Glynn and all. And I think the ordinance requires also arborist review, and he's gonna look at the site, or you can call him in and say, I got a 60-inch oak here and a 30-inch oak over here. I'm only 60 foot wide.
Something's gotta go.
Right, so you don't need to plant a tree.
Yeah.
Hopefully what he's gonna say on that, so.
Commissioner, I'd like to elaborate on that, if I may. I'm in the land clearing business. We just went through a big project with the city. We protected trees like I've never had to protect trees ever. I just went today, and probably 50 or 60% of them's dead. Anytime you change the elevation, anytime you change the underbrush, anytime you change anything, that tree is more than likely gonna die.
And you know that I know that as well.
Sir. It's more
And,
than likely it's gonna happen.
So-
You can't protect it. I don't know why it does it. It just takes the studs and dies.
And Robert, I keep addressing you, but anytime you need backup, you know,
Yeah.
grab it.
I know
But
Stephanie is.
the replacement value, if we had a 60-inch oak that has to come down, is there a formula for the replacement? You obviously, you can't move out to the street and replant a 60-inch oak. What's the, it's a multiple,
I don't know, Stephanie, you may help me on that. I don't know that we changed anything on that because we weren't real sure exactly what to do. I think what our main goal was reduce the number of trees required, because I think both Gary and I have worked on projects where we try to put 12 trees per acre on something, and it's difficult. You end up planting trees like corn,
yes,
And
that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about oak trees.
So Robert, basically what you're saying, if you put the same species, if you cut a 60-inch oak tree down on a lot, for whatever reason, you have to, or you just want it gone, for whatever reason. If you put a 6-inch live oak, if that's a live oak tree, and you put a 6-inch live oak tree back, that's sufficient?
I don't think it is.
I
And
thought
that's-
it was a
that's
multiple.
based- Yeah, it's based on the current ordinance. And a
Yeah.
lot of that, we just put it in the new ordinance. And then, what we did do with the tree ordinance is we tried to come up with a process for each type of construction. In other words, for site plan, or now we're calling it development plan review. There's a review process for that, and an implementation process for that. For preliminary plats, there's a process for that. Right now, the tree ordinance is you've got to do a lot of
So
interpolation.
do we need a sticky note, and
Yeah,
let's
about-
talk a little bit more about tree ordinance.
Right, well, about large trees, about how we mitigate that, and what you're talking about is mitigation.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Neal, one other question. When we talk about tree ordinance, we only talk about St. Simon's Island, correct? So, this is the kind of stuff that just sticks to me for some reason. So a live oak tree in West Glynn County is not as important as live oak tree on St. Simon's. I don't understand that, okay? But with that being said, we got too many trees on St. Simon's Island now. We got more trees there than we ever had. They're killing people.
I'm not gonna argue with you
Yeah,
with
they're
that.
killing people.
And,
We need less tree canopy on St. Simon's Island.
But you know, and I
It'd be more
know,
beautiful that way.
the pressure on the island is different than the pressure on the mainland. And it's in response to citizen outcry, it's the reason that it's being considered. Thank God, we live out in the county,
Yes, sir.
and we don't have that same pressure.
If you get an arborist to go to St. Simon's, he'll tell you that a big majority of trees on St. Simon's are unhealthy because they're too close together and too tight.
Still,
They're dying left
no
and right.
argument, but let's try to state a point.
I think-
We're gonna make a sticky note.
For mature trees,
Yes, sir.
yeah, let's.
So you've got that.
I wrote down a large tree ordinance, basically mature oaks is the way we use that as a definition. Mitigation on St. Simon's, and the question is, do we look at mature oaks on the mainland?
And one of the things that we have to look at,
We don't know.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Look at mature oaks on.
but one of the things that we have to circle back to, if we take down a mature oak, and there's a formula by which you take down a 60-inch tree, you've got to put, 10 6-inch oaks back in its place. Obviously, with lot coverage, you can't do that, so
Well,
that just has to stay in the discussion of what's reasonable.
Right, and I agree, I don't like replacing, taking one tree and replacing it with 6. Sometimes, like you said, there's no room to do that.
Right.
So there needs to be a more thoughtful consideration as how we allow that tree to come down. I don't know if there's a tree bank process or something like that. I'm not generally for that, but 6 trees for one, sometimes I don't think it's a good idea.
All right. Anyone else with a comment?
When we have our next hurricane and it wipes out all the trees on a lot, is the homeowner responsible for replacing trees?
I would be in favor of, if it's an act of God, it's an act of God. So if we've got an act of God in,
I was thinking you have some elderly
Absolutely.
person on a fixed income and
yes, absolutely.
yes, they own their house, but all of a sudden we're telling them
Yeah.
that they have to come in and replant all the trees.
Well, at that point, the tree probably fell on the house, they're gonna have to replace the house.
Yeah, nothing for the act of God, okay. Nothing that would require that.
Okay.
Anybody else have a comment?
Just one more thing real quick, just kind of to echo what Missy's talking about. I would just like us to think more about grandfathering a lot of things in that are gonna penalize people that have owned property for a while. But I understand going forward, if I come in and I buy a new piece of property, but if I've had a piece of property for a while and everything around it has been able to do this, and then we're gonna basically penalize them just because they waited, like you said.
Yeah. And I can tell you that is not the intent.
Right.
So if we find that, it's reviewable.
Okay.
I think the idea is to leave grandfather, places that are there, grandfathered, and I take Missy's point as well, is that there's some things that, I guess parking standards would be one. I'm a little nuts. Short-term rental is making a mess in places, I can tell you that. I have one across the street, and they're absentee landlords, they're living in Atlanta somewhere. They paved the front of the yard, the first thing they did.
Robert, you're gonna have to pull the mic.
Yeah,
Pull it to you, I think.
so that's a short-term rental on St. Simon's, and it's not just me. I get a lot of conversations from people coming up to me and say, "What are we gonna do about it?" And in places, it's intrusive to neighborhoods. I mean, you got people that don't live there. On our little street, we had a pretty tight little neighborhood, and now we're getting short-term rentals, and so we don't have neighbors anymore. We got people that come and go. The people that, that own the place don't even live in Glynn County. So, I don't know. I'd like to see some recognition that it can make a mess out of a neighborhood. That's what I say. And so far, we've done very, very little in that regard, in this ordinance. Parking,
Yeah, and
parking's only a minor
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that, and just as a reminder to the community, if you got an issue with a short-term rental, you need to be calling the number and reporting it, because every time we get reports on how many complaints there've been, they're very minimal. And usually, a lot of them, my understanding is, it's the same person over and over, so there is a problematic property here or there, but, it's, you know, it's
But it's
hard to retract in when people have made financial, my issue is, it's hard to pull back and cause somebody to have a foreclosure or, you know, have to give something up that was part of their life plan, because we sat here and made this change that could impact them. So, you know, I'm fine, you know, with certain changes. And that was my point, was I agree. I have a house in my neighborhood that has 12 cars that park there every single night. And it's not a rental, you know. And so to me, that car problem is the same car problem, right? So that was my point with the parking, is that there's plenty of people that, have, you know, 4 driving kids in a 4-bedroom house, and so you got 6 cars, right? And that's a problem. But I understand what you're saying. You got a small enough neighborhood, you get your HOA going on over there to do that job. But now the horse is out of the barn. A lot of places.
There
and I
is
get that.
absolutely no way to write a perfect ordinance for our
Right.
county
Right.
that's gonna take care of every single circumstance.
Right.
Absolutely not. The thing that we have to remember is, you know, we're working for the better good. And I'm a property rights advocate. I believe strongly in highest and best use rights of the property owner. But in ensuring the property rights of the owner of 101 Main Street, you can't impinge upon the rights of 103 Main Street. And that's what we're trying to find the balance of, to
Right.
protect the properties, because we know that we have neighborhoods that are transitioning into short-term rental neighborhoods. That is, while it's good for the individual property owners, it's not good for the long-term owner that is owner occupied. And we're working to find that balance. I want to say one other thing, and you know, we have on St. Simon's short-term rentals. What we don't have on St. Simon's Island is high-rise apartments, high-rise rentals, hotels on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we chose not to have that. Short-term rentals filled a market niche. It was something, tourism is our driving force here in Glynn County. We chose, I think, the lesser of two evils. And, but we do have to learn how to live with what we've got and make sure that we're safeguarding to the best of our ability. But thank God we don't have high-rise condos sitting out there on the beach impinging on the beauty of St. Simon's Island. So, with that, I'm sure I'll get buried tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
You know, that's a good statement, man. Thank you.
Commissioner, every time I bring something up, it seems like somebody, for whatever reason, says, oh, this is a living, breathing document. We can change it at will. Could you tell me the process of how it would be changed?
all right, you've got a situation where you're coming in to pull a building permit for an investor somewhere or a homeowner. You've got a contract house to build, and you come in and you find something in the code that is different and damaging to that homeowner. You would bring it to a staff, would look at it. We're going to develop an expedited route to get that issue addressed.
So we don't have that now.
Yeah, no.
We've got something similar. It's a slow-moving process. It's slower moving than what it was. And what we have now is a different culture on how we're gonna address things.
So it doesn't have to be noticed to the public, it doesn't have to go before the Island Planning Commission, the Mainland Planning Commission?
I'm not gonna say without exception it would. What I'm saying is we're trying to devise the expedited process so that it doesn't delay you unreasonably in trying to solve the problem that was inadvertently created. We have that now. We fight it. I fight it all the time, where I find things in the zoning where I'm trying to help some lady that called me about some issue, and she's not zoned to be able to do what she wants to do in an area that seems perfectly reasonable that it would be allowed. And the process is lengthy as it sits right now. We're trying to solve that, to expedite it, so that we make overall, we're not gonna solve everybody's problem.
Commissioner, these are laws. The ordinances are laws.
And-
And I find it very hard to believe that legally, we just gonna be able to change laws.
I didn't say we could do it with the stroke of a pen. I said we could expedite the process.
Without public notice
Well-
and public hearings.
Well, we have done it many times in the past. I mean, there's been.
We
in my-
change ordinances
In my,
and amend ordinances
Regularly?
pretty regularly, yes.
pretty regularly, not every commission meeting,
Right.
certainly not, but multiple times a year, we'll amend an ordinance.
Yeah,
And
one-
we've been doing that.
Yeah, and Wayne, my time, and it's both as an architect and on the planning commission and off the planning commission and back on, I know there's been things, I think one of the first ones I was involved in was defining overhang, what an overhang is. And it was determined, it was a guy on Sea Island built an overhang on his house that was 6 feet into the setback. There was no ordinance against it. So the neighbors, you can imagine a lawsuit on Sea Island. But anyway, that was one thing. We came back and we came up with a definition for what can be in the setback, which included an 18-inch overhang, which is what's in our ordinance today. That was one small one, and that was done in about 30 days' time.
And another case in point, AC condensers outside, sitting in a setback zone. If it sat on a concrete slab, it was allowed. If you had to put it on a 12-inch high pedestal to get it out of the flood zone, it wasn't allowed. We corrected that with an ordinance change.
Without public notice or public?
No,
hearing?
we had a public hearing. Yeah,
No,
yeah. It came for both planning commissions, and it went forward to you all, and you passed it.
yeah.
And it was done in process, but but anything we do takes time. I mean, it's even a building permit today,
Yes, sir.
Neil.
It's a lot quicker than it has been.
Yeah.
So,
But,
all right.
but yes, there is a process, and, I think it's
And-
worked in the past.
and so many of the things that I think you refer to, Neil, are problems that exist today with today's ordinances. And we're working to try to make it better. Anybody else have a comment? All right. John, I'll let you make closing remarks and we'll see where we go from here.
Commissioner Boatright, just to answer one question or one comment. So after our conversation, I did have a discussion with the county attorney. So we've expanded the scope of that review. Yes, we've got to do the constitutional review for these elected officials, but also they are expanding that scope of work to review it from, in the military we use feasible, acceptable, and suitable as a way of looking at a plan of action. So to that point, the attorney group that we do have is looking at the ordinance other than just from a legal aspect of it. So that is being expanded to dovetail off that. So this is a proposed timeline. It's not a hard and fast timeline. And since I've been assisting in this endeavor, we've actually slid this about 4 months to the right over the course of really about 6 months. So it is a moving timeline. Yes, we would like to eventually get to a point of considering for adoption. But what this is just putting us in a pathway. We believe we complete the planning and legal review by the end of November is what we're projecting for the legal team. The legal team is looking at it right now. They'll look at after the comments that come out of today and any adjustment that come out of this meeting. They'll look at those potential revisions. And at that point in time, the intent is for them to provide us a clean draft on or about the end of November. We'll take the month of December for citizen review, as well as your review, the Board of Commissioners review. So an additional 30 days. Then we'll have looking at a special called meeting to focus just on the for consideration for adoption of this particular zoning ordinance updates for both the mainland and the island, with a potential tentative special called meeting in January for the Board of Commissioners. Each of those meetings will be public hearings, so after we release the final draft on or about the 1st of December, citizens still can come to your respective meetings and the Board of Commissioners and provide any additional feedback. Depending on that feedback that we receive from both you and our citizens, you'll consider it at that point in time. If you feel like that you need some additional time, if there's some major things that are still out there that need to be addressed, we'll address them at that point in time. And if we need to adjust our timeline a little bit, then I think we'll move forward with that. So this is a guideline, not necessarily a deadline, as the chairman mentioned. So at least just gives us a goal of what we're trying to achieve, and some. In this case, has given the legal review team more of a deadline to win what we want from their review from that. So with that, I'd also like to echo what the chairman said. The working group that is listed at the bottom of this page, some of you have been a part of that from the stand up of it. Have done a tremendous amount of work. You spent a lot of time. Echo Commissioner Boatwright, we appreciate all that you've done, because you have spent a lot of time in that and provide a lot of good feedback. We're nearing that point where we can kind of finalize some things, shift it over into a final legal review, expanded scope to also look at it, making sure that it's feasible, acceptable, suitable to both you as commissions as well as the citizens of here. So I fully expect that this legal team will say, yes, this is legally defensible, but do you really want to do this? Those are the type questions we've asked them to be able to look at, and look at it from that lens, from a planning lens, not just from a legal lens as well. So we hope to be that. I know a lot of this has, we use TSW to do a lot of the professional planning in it, and it's been adjusted since that particular time. We understand that, and so hopefully that will clean it up at the end. So,
and I would say this, John, South Georgia lingo, from a building perspective, if you aim at nothing, you're sure to hit it. And we have to, when it comes to trying to get to the end of this, we got to aim for something. So that's the purpose.
From a building perspective, sometimes you hit your thumb too.
Well, sometimes you do, but we have to aim at something here, and that's what we're doing.
Before also, Commissioner.
With that,
Would you entertain one question about the timeline?
yes.
So would y'all at all, obviously, I think the vast majority of the public probably have become a little numb to this and don't really understand where we are in the process. So after the December 1st final draft, I think you will hopefully have a host of people that really take the time to understand. But have y'all considered at all having a public meeting where the staff can thoroughly, maybe on somewhat of a high level, explain the changes and give the public the opportunity to weigh in before we're voting on the adoption of it? So, I know one of the times in the past, Robert, y'all had a pretty big meeting on some ordinance changes. It was over at Epworth. A lot of the public showed up and was able to, have this overview that was really, and they had a document that explained it. And, many people left there satisfied, but then it also gave, the opportunity for, hey, I'm thinking about this. We all think about that, so that hopefully both planning commissions are voting on the same document that has had, the final document has had that public meeting where there's staff there to answer questions and make a presentation and they can give input. Because otherwise you may have a group of people come to the Mainland Planning Commission meeting and I don't want to think that public hearing's for naught. They may have some good input that then is considered by the island, that some changes are made or considered by the island or vice versa, however it lands, so that there is public input in person before an adoption vote is taken.
And that's a reasonable expectation.
Not
If
that
we-
any of us want any more meetings.
Yeah, because if the Mainland Planning Commission, their public hearing had, if I'm hearing you correctly, if they had someone that made a suggestion and the Mainland Planning Committee approves and agrees with that, then it still has to go back to the Island Planning Commission to be presented there, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it could certainly take more time.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable, and maybe we need to put a sticky note on that to make sure that we keep that in the discussion.
Commissioner Chairman, Chairman Neal, I just like, and everybody knows this, I just like to make the statement that this document is the most important thing that you, as chairman of the Glynn County Board of Commissioners, presides over. This is gonna be the most important thing that's gonna have long-lasting tentacles that Bill Fallon will ever touch for Glynn County, or Mr. Gentry will ever touch for Glynn County. And we certainly need to take the time to make sure that the people that we leave this county to are in good shape and not burdened by this document for years and years and years to come. The last document that we operate off of now, I've been told, is 50 years old. So we certainly need to take the time that's necessary to go over this and to make sure we've got this right. We owe it to our citizens not to ramrod this thing through and get it as correctly and as beneficial for our citizens as we possibly can get it.
And I agree with that statement 100%, but I don't think anybody would think that we have ramrodded as long as this deal has been in the process. So I'm going to take and call that an end to the meeting then. I want to thank y'all for coming. I want to thank you for the input. For those of you that have been on this working committee, hundreds of hours probably doesn't cover the amount of time you put into it. And I am very appreciative of the dedication y'all have to this future document that we're going to have. A lot of hard work, and I hope that when we get to the end, we've got a document that's very close to being what we all will like and appreciate. Thank y'all, and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Meeting adjourned.